So the first question, just before we bring on our panel, fashion versus big data, survive or thrive? Nicole Phelps actually came to me with this question some while ago, and she's very kindly moderating the panel. We're all very, very familiar with the concept of big data. It's a terrible word for quite an important thing. It has the power to snap a broad and detailed picture of what's going on, the niches and tastes and habits within it. So why is it that large parts of the fashion world have been so slow to embrace that?
So for our first poll, big data, this is the question, is A, essential for modern commerce, B, a useful tech tool to be used judiciously, or C, essential for keeping nerds like me at their desks in dark rooms?
So go to your phones, fcdnyc.com, and vote A, B, or C.
Now I have a big number for you, Simon. It's 53 billion. Do you know what that is? That's the data points that a company called Edited collects on almost 1,000 retailers internationally over 4 years of researching this. So what does that mean? They're collecting all this data on these retailers so retailers can move forward. Now, fashion is typically anecdotal, right? Businesses move their businesses towards just like basically stories that we hear. But in my opinion, I think data is super necessary.
Do you know, data's like a tool. A hammer is also a tool, and I don't ask a hammer how to design my collection. I mean, if you look at Alexander Wang, for instance, Alexander Wang, of course, but the Alexander McQueen collection, Savage Beauty, I'm pretty confident that he wasn't using big data to design that collection.
Of course not. Anyway, why don't we go on and have the panel talk about this, shall we?
Indeed, let's ask the experts. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming our first panel.
Thinking of a master plan. This ain't nothing but sweat inside my hands. So I dig into my pocket, all my money spent. So I get deeper, but still coming up.
All right, thank you ladies for joining me, and thank you everyone for coming. As Simon said, this idea came to me earlier this year. I was reading an article in Vanity Fair about the end of Hollywood, in which David Carr, the late great New York Times journalist, made a point that the executives at Netflix knew that House of Cards would be a hit before action was even called. That got me thinking, why doesn't fashion operate that way? Why are we so far behind? And once Simon informed me who I would be sitting with more recently, I realized I think I might have it wrong. There are young women entrepreneurs in fashion who have been building businesses, in fact, on data, and I am sitting here with them today. So thank you again. And I thought we could start by asking Jennie and Katrina a little bit about their own companies and, in fact, how data drives their entire business.
Great. I can start. I'm really sorry, everybody. I have like no voice. So this is not like a cool raspy thing. This is like my voice is almost gone and squeaky. So thank you for bearing with me. So at Stitch Fix, we use data in so many ways. And we should come back to the Netflix thing because I have a cool story to add about that, about kind of how we've done something similar to that. But at Stitch Fix, this whole intro about big data was interesting because, to be honest, like I don't know that big data is what I really believe in. I really do believe in the importance of data. But at Stitch Fix, we have clients who let us know their size and style preferences. We work with over 600 vendors and brands, and we attribute clothes so that we can really understand clothes well. And then we have stylists, real human stylists, who are choosing things for our clients to try on at home so they can have a fitting room delivered so they can try and buy. We think of ourselves as, in some ways, matchmakers between clothes, or between brands and customers, but also between kind of helping customers find what they love. And so we use data in many ways, but the data that we use is not actually this like 65 billion data point big data. To give you guys I feel like big data is also like a big scary word that people don't fully understand, and to give you like a very real life version of it. At Yahoo, they have like a 200-page paper that's like based on your search history and based on all the things you click on, like we can determine with 65% accuracy whether you're male or female. And like at Stitch Fix, we just ask you, and we just ask you what you're looking for, and we just ask you how did those pants fit. And so in some weird ways, what we're doing is small data, and I think to really think about how data works in your model, like big data and the kind of ambiguous data that may or may not be meaningful is not like how you should be thinking about it. It really should be thinking like just one customer at a time, like how can I get to know her or him, and how can I produce things that she's gonna love? How can I send her things that she's gonna love? And so at Stitch Fix, we do that and we use data, but I really think it's in a more human kind of customer-centric way.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So my name is Jennie Baik. I started a luxury marketplace called Orchard Mile. And what we do is effectively we partner with some of the best world-class luxury and advanced contemporary brands in the world. We effectively clone their brand websites, and we bring in all of their digital assets, all of their product descriptions, and all of their prices in real time into a very consistent mall environment in which you have a very consistent user experience, and we check people out with a shared shopping cart. So effectively, in layman's terms, it's like having 120 tabs open on your computer, but seamlessly checking out once. And so, about 2 weeks ago, we launched something called My Mile, which is, it allows consumers to basically add designers, save your filters. So we like to liken it to a fourth date as opposed to a first date on a retail site. And that is, you can build your own Madison Avenue in the sky. So you can have certain designers sit with other designers. You can pick what categories you like within a designer. It saves the fact that you're a size 4 or size 6, and it remembers you. And it's the back of it is built on a very robust recommendation engine with artificial intelligence and machine learning. But I think, the reason I think we're all talking about big data today is not because all of us decided, one day we're going to disrupt the fashion industry and we're going to do it with big data, because that doesn't sound like a lot of fun, to be honest. I think we're talking about this today because there is fundamentally just a cultural shift. I used to work for a luxury brand house, and right around 2012 to 2014, you could see the cultural zeitgeist moving in a way where not everyone wanted to go into the same branded store, right? The store in Hong Kong is exactly like the one in New York. That wasn't a fun experience anymore. People wanted great design, but they wanted it adapted to their lifestyle. And there's this whole kind of cultural idea of if you constantly try to follow fashion, you're never going to catch it. And I think we're so inundated with so much data and so much influence of social media that now, for the first time, I think in history, under only 100 years ago, people were stuffing themselves into corsets, right? But only now are brands and designers and retailers really adapting to the consumer environment and to their tastes.
Speaking about brands, Jessica, can you give us a little background about some of the companies that you've worked with and how you're educating them about data?
Absolutely, yeah. So I work with brands of all kinds of sizes who are trying to figure out, how do I build a best-in-class data science team? How do I launch a brand in 2017? How do I, decide how much of something I should produce before it's even been, tested on the market? How should I grow my audience and kind of optimize? And I look through the latest kind of AI and machine learning research and also the software that's coming out to find ways to do that that's more interesting than, the kind of state of the art, which is, if you want to launch a new product, you say, well, I want it to be millennials, I want them to live in New York, I want them to make this much money, and kind of shifting that whole conversation towards how does this person behave? Have they shown that they have a taste for a certain thing? Like now that their AI is kind of ready to process images and really use data that's in a format that used to be too unstructured, you can really use that as a young brand to decide how you launch your product and optimize who you're targeting. Mm-hmm.
I think that brings up something that I think a lot about at Vogue, Vogue.com, where I can see the numbers and I see what's performing, and there's a lot of, there's internal and external pressure to respond to that and to create content around the things that our readers and our viewers like and want. On the other hand, I've been an editor for 20 years and know a lot about the fashion world and have good contacts, and so I think finding that balance between creativity and what I think is editorially important and what the numbers are telling me is something that I'm constantly constantly sort of struggling with. And can you talk a little bit about that, the balance, this is sort of vague, but sort of balancing what all of you know about fashion and your instinct with the numbers, what the data is telling you?
I mean, with all of these things, like I really believe in art and science together. And so I think it's really hard to have the data alone. And so to pull an analogy from Stitch Fix, we have a personalized score for every single product and client, which is like the likelihood that the client's gonna like that or keep that. And that's, so, and you know, there might be a very democratic, you know, striped shirt that like everybody loves. So, you know, on average, 60% of people are gonna like that. You know, for this person, it's 80, for this person, it's 40, but it's that second part that's missing. And so as you're thinking about the content on Vogue.com, like the more democratic, more things that lots of people like is gonna be kind of at the top. But I think as we think about the future and as we think about getting to know each reader better, rather than getting to know the average of all readers, if you could actually know that like Jenny loves Alexander McQueen and Jenny loves, you know, any fashion news about AI or whatever, if you could really understand at the individual level what the preferences are, then you kind of can get out of being lost in averages. But I think it's a real challenge, and there's a real art and science. And in our model, you know, there will be things as a stylist is choosing things for people, we can predict with a high degree of accuracy. Like when we say this is an 80% chance of working, we go back and look historically at everything that we thought was 80%, and it is exactly 80%. But the reality is that's not 100%. That means that 1 in 5 people that we sent it to didn't like that thing. But what those individual kind of each looking at people as individuals rather than as averages keeps us from getting pulled into the democratic things, the things that everybody clicks on, the things that people are more likely to like being at the top, and then also being able to infuse some personal recommendations. So you may like this striped shirt, but you also may like this, you know, dress that is maybe less democratic, that's not, you know, gonna be at the top of every single bestseller list. And so that one-to-one part of the personalization is really hard, but I think it's really important.
Can you talk a little bit about how you're blending the data and the stylists who are, you have a huge number of stylists across the country. So how do the numbers and the actual, you know, point of view, how do you marry them?
Yeah, so so the example that I'll use is the example of chess. And so the world's best chess champion was once beat by a machine. And the narrative became, oh my gosh, these machines are now so smart. Robots are going to take over the world. We're all not going to have jobs, and machines are going to be better than us. And then more recently, what they've realized is that actually like a mediocre chess player working with a mediocre machine or algorithm is going to beat the world's best chess player playing alone or the world's best machine playing alone. And so what that's saying is like the combination of a human working with a machine or a robot or, you know, data science is going to be just a better combination than either the human alone, so like a stylist walking through the warehouse with like a clipboard, or an algorithm alone, like our algorithm just spitting up combinations and sending them to clients. The two working together is so much better. And in our model, the data science provides the stylist with great data, so that the stylist can say these jeans have an 80% chance of working, these have a 60% chance of working, but like I know Jessica's going to love these ones, even though it's only a 60%, because like, you know, I think that she's going on vacation, or she has liked she likes trendier things, and I think these are, you know, these have a wider leg, or for whatever reason, so the stylist can apply her own judgment over those recommendations. And so the two working together is so much better. And so in our model, it's still stylists that are choosing things. And the most beautiful part of like the chess thing and at Stitch Fix is that, Kasparov is like the world's best chess champion. He loves playing with the machine now, because what he says is like, the machine is great with all the rote calculations, and it frees me up to be creative. And like, that's what I'm really good at, and that's what I love about chess. And our stylists feel the same way, because when the data science is taking care of the recommendations, it frees her up to be creative, and it frees her up to create the human connection with each of our clients. And those are the things that really humans are better at, that we love, and that are fulfilling for us. And so in our model, I see the data science and technology as empowering our stylists to be better stylists, empowering our buyers to be better buyers, and, you know, it's not replacing them at all.
I might just add, I know that Simon loves it when we disagree with each other, so to have a bit of a different conversation. So I think I do agree with the whole idea of perhaps in stylist or retail that you do want the data and a human involved. But there are certain things, just being exposed to the luxury market for so long, there are just some things, there's this whole like data fetishization movement that's happening. And there are the POV that high-end designers have cannot be replicated. It is my point of view that it cannot be replicated by data. So the fact that Gucci is having a moment right now, that their Supreme granny wear, could data have predicted that 2 years ago? I would venture to say no. You might have been able to see sort of a micro trend happening, but the actual genius that infused that collection in the last couple seasons is not replicable by data, nor is it replicable by machine learning. And so there are lots of different things that the luxury fashion houses can do to embrace data. I've actually been really disappointed at how slow that some of these luxury houses have been to embrace data, but design is not it. It's actually service aspects in terms of amping up service, like what you're doing at Stitch Fix, that allows people to really, meet the customer wherever they want to see Gucci's collection, perhaps, how they want to, interact with other Gucci fans. It's all of that that's very exciting to amp up, what was traditionally the Cartier Black Book, where an associate would write down all the preferences of a consumer. That can be digitized and, really incorporated into the institutional learning that a luxury house has.
I totally agree. I mean, the creativity and like the design element of fashion and that guttural, like I never thought I would love that, and I love that part. I mean, that is, I don't imagine that data will take that over at all, I think. But as you think about things like, you're looking at how many, white jeans are people going to buy, and what inseams are they, and what sizes are they? Like, there's a lot that you can use to help data to inform your assortment in a way that, will reduce your liability and kind of help make sure that you are buying the right things for the right people. But I think the creativity, like, I guess my whole point is more, there are things that we are doing that machines will be better at, which are things like that, like figuring out inseams and, figuring out what proportion of inseams and waist sizes we should have. But being able to use data to do those things better actually enables humans to do what they're really good at, which is exactly that, like all the really creative things that we're all better at and that would really can never be replicated by machines.
Yeah, and I think the other point to that is that Stitch Fix is designed to take, the 80 plus PhDs, and they're kind of built into the business from the start, where a lot of luxury companies will say, oh, I think we need data. Cool, let's find a PhD. They hire 5 or 10 or 20, and they do a project, and they find out, oh, we didn't make any revenue with all these data scientists. I thought they were going to make us money, and I thought we were going to make millions, and we just spent more on their salaries than we're ever going to see back. And part of it's because sometimes it's just difficult to get the right hiring situation. And the other part is that a lot of the times the PhDs aren't kind of integrated with the original kind of vision of business. And a lot of times they're in the basement, and a lot of times they're not. If they don't have the business training, they're not put next to the business people and told these are your allies. They're kind of put off to the side. So I think there's a really powerful part of Stitch Fix because it's kind of built into the company from the start, but there is a conversation of how do you get a luxury company that's already existing, where it might be hard even to get allowed to see where data is, let alone use it to make a decision. How can companies learn to retrofit in a smarter way, in a more tactical way? And I think the small data conversation makes a lot of sense in that case, where you show them, you spend 10, 15 hours a week in spreadsheets. What if you spent 1, or you just pressed a button every time you needed this report? And that's usually a good way to kind of guide it in and show those returns really quickly.
So are there generalizations you can make about best practices for the kind of brands that you're working with in terms of data for a young brand growing up? I mean, is it essential from the start for a designer to be paying attention to those details?
I think data will never tell you, this is a product that I need to make. I think that will always be a small data, really small data, to the point of maybe it's just qualitative, like what product should I produce, what should I do? I think it's very important for brands to go to market and actually test. When I put money into this Facebook ad machine, is it giving me back what I need, or is it costing me too much? Am I paying too much for the customers to ever get it back in my based on the price point that I'm selling at? And so I think it is important to think about that from the start and be able to build on that asset. Another thing that people run into is they'll have a product that fits the market and people are really into it and it's growing and it's growing and it's growing really fast. And then a few years later, they realize, oh my goodness, we don't have the infrastructure to capture all the data that we should have that would give us the ability to make decisions automatically. And then it becomes, startups will end up having the same kind of re-platforming issues that big companies do. And so I think it is really intensely important to make sure you have a strong digital strategy from the start, because you might be losing data that could give you a huge edge over kind of the incumbents.
Mm-hmm. Is data ever wrong, or have you ever read the data and felt instinctively that it was not what you wanted to do and you sort of ignored the data?
It is all the time wrong. I'll give you a couple examples, and this is why I think it's like this art and science. Like, I really think it's art and science working together, and you use data to make better decisions, but they're still human decisions. And so 2 examples I'll give you. One is, and when our stylists are choosing things, I've talked about that personalized recommendation scores. There are times I can look at my own profile, and the data and our algorithm recommends something at the top that I'm like, I don't like that. And that happens for sure. And those are all averages. Those are all expectations of what's going to happen. And even if we feel like you're going to like this 80% of the time, there's still 20% of the time that you're not. And so that's why that human layer is so important. And in our model, it frees up our data scientists to be more creative, actually, because the data scientist knows that there's a stylist at the end. And so if our algorithm is saying like something crazy, like someone's going to like this, and or it's something that's not really appropriate to recommend to a 20-year-old or a 60-year-old, like the stylist just won't send it. And so there's like a human check at the end that enables our algorithms to be able to try more things and take more risks. The other example I'll give you, and this is the one that is similar to the Netflix example that you brought up. One of the things, if you think about, we're at Stitch Fix, we're kind of, we're more like a department store assortment. We have hundreds of vendors. We carry a range from more basic core items to more fashion items. And so there are some subset of things, pencil skirts, blazers, that we more or less replenish. Then there's kind of a bucket of things where we reinvent, where it's like you need kind of the new work blouse for this season that has some details, some elements of trend, but is still something that's more basic, for example. And then we have the more trend side of the assortment. In that middle side, we've been doing this thing called hybrid designs. And what that does is we have a data scientist who, she had a chemistry background, but she's using genetics algorithms to recombine traits of products that have worked in the past to propose items that then our product development team can go make. And so it's similar to the Netflix thing, because it's like, okay, this Kevin Spacey thing, people like politics, it's kind of piecing together what is it that people like. And so we'll say, okay, we need more for fall, we need more casual wovens for our customers who are, in their 20s and kind of low 30s. And so what we'll do is we'll go back and say, what are those casual wovens that have worked for those? What are attributes of those? And so in the same way that genetics kind of recombines traits for different generations to create new versions, every one of us is unique people, we use similar algorithms where our data science team will come back and say, here's 20 styles that I think we should develop. And they're data scientists that are creating these, it's not designers. But then we have designers who work with them of saying like, that's not a good idea. That one I think will work. This one we've done something very similar and it did work, but maybe it's too similar to something we've done. And so we have kind of this human overlay over it. But these hybrid designs have been extremely successful. To your point, they don't substitute for the newness. Like they can't recombine traits if we've never had like now all the cold shoulder stuff that you see, like if we had never had one before, like those genetics algorithms could never recombine that as a trait. So we still need the trend and we still need the newness, but being able to use data there really frees up our team to be able to focus on new and the trend, and we can rely on more of the data science to help us with the evolution side of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I like what you said about small data and specifically, I think, on a very, very basic level, based on transactional data, if we just went on that, Orchard Mile would have just rows and rows and rows of black sweaters on every product detail page because that's what people buy, let's be honest. Like people replace their black sweaters. But really what you have is human decisions beyond all that data. So when My Mile was in beta, we have a designer on the site called Roland Murray, and basically, Roland Murray, we have a partnership with them. They gave us this whole bucket of like deluxe candles. And they said, these are leftover from a party. We would love it if you just gave it to whoever transacted already on the site. And that would be an indicator, perhaps because of the transactional data, that person is likely to purchase again. We actually did the opposite of what they said, or maybe just twisted a little bit. Anyone who had not bought Roland Murray, but who had added it to their mile and were considering it, they were kind of hemming and hawing about it, we actually gifted them a candle and said, okay, with a handwritten note from the founders, which is what, the idea of service, and that the element of surprise and delight and shock and word of mouth that we got from that, oh my goodness, you actually recognize what I care about, that you've been paying attention to me even online, that was seen as not creepy, but actually quite fantastic. So you can really break down, data shouldn't be scary. You can use it in smaller ways that surprise and delight, even if you don't have necessarily a team of data scientists.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of two ways you can go wrong with if the data's wrong. So it's either, it could be that the way that the data is being looked at is wrong, and it could be that the data does not make sense for the problem. So to your point, if you take Netflix or Amazon's recommender system and you just throw them onto, let's say, Farfetch, it's just not going to work. It's going to be terrible. It's going to it won't be personalized at all. It really, the algorithms that were developed for that make sense for a situation where you can constantly replenish the supply of the same item over and over and over, which is why companies like Stitch Fix and List and others have to go really deep into the research to find where are those algorithms that work for fashion problems where an item might only be on a website for a couple months, if that, and then go out of stock forever. So it could be that the data is designed wrong for the problem, but the other thing that happens is there's a culture also of, well, I look at the numbers all the time. I know my KPIs. I see them, every month, and it's like, well, the raw data can only get you so far. If it's not for something like product and you're not just looking for those insights, you have to go from I'm looking at numbers every month to I built a model and I don't have to think about what the numbers are going to do every month. If it's above or below, it's going to notify me automatically. And then you go from that to building data products, kind of like what Stitch Fix is doing and what others are doing. So I think the other thing that is dangerous is people think that I'm very data literate. I know my numbers, I know my KPIs, I'm good. And they don't actually get to use it for anything. And so they miss kind of the potential.
Going back to the beginning of the conversation and this idea that luxury brands and fashion, big picture, has ignored data for too long. What advice, all of you would, as people who have, been studying data and using it to your advantage for quite some time, what would you give to sort of the late entrants, other than, start looking at the numbers right away? Is there a smart way for fashion to start paying attention more?
I think it's important to start small and start with a thing that will either save you time, save you money, or generate revenue. Because once those things happen, your teams will transform faster, they'll get more used to it, they'll get more comfortable with it. So if you're in kind of transformation mode, I think it's very important to start with small projects that clearly will give you a pathway to revenue or time savings or money savings. And I think it's also important to have dialogues with the tech industry. Go to a conference that you might not understand and just start asking questions. I think there's a very big divide right now. There's very few times when I go to a tech conference and I see more than 10 faces in the data science room that's specifically for e-commerce or fashion. So I think have conversations with those industries and use all the expertise that's already been developed.
Mm-hmm. My advice is really know what problem you're trying to solve. And I think people feel like I should have a data strategy and then go down this path and don't really find things that are meaningful for their business. And so my advice is less about data. It's just get to know your customer. That's why data is important in our model. Like it's really important to us in order to help people find what they love. We need to understand what their body is like. We need to understand what they're looking for. And all of the data that we use is really in service to being able to help him or her find what she loves. And so I think it's really being purposeful about what you're trying to do. And data is an amazing tool to be able to help you to do that. But in our case, like it's still all about the customer and just getting to know individuals.
Yeah, so at Orchard Mile, it's our personal belief that there is going to be a retail renaissance. So, Neil Blumenthal from Warby Parker probably said it best, in that, retail is not dead, mediocre retail is dead, and data is going to help us get to the next level. And really, it's about the personalization. Back in the 2000s, it was about the personalization of product, right? It was Nike ID, it was Burberry trench coats that you could create. And now it's about the personalization of experience. And I think Katrina's business obviously is a really great example of that. And you're going to see, obviously, Apple is, nicheifying their stores. So it's Apple iPhone for photographers or for chefs or for gamers. So more and more of this is going to happen. And the only way to really get in front of that and to understand what kind of hobbyists that your consumers are is to collect data about them and get their consent to do so, but certainly be smart about how you're executing your experience.
All right, we don't have much time left. Is there something that's going to surprise us as consumers and as e-commerce shoppers going down the line? How is data changing 5 years from 10 years? Can you make any predictions about what it'll be like then?
I think we're going to keep getting into this problem of what am I allowed to collect and in what country and where can it be stored and on what servers and under what conditions. And I think the techniques that are going to be interesting are the techniques of data science that forget and can have someone come in and know nothing about the customer and still give them a relatively personalized experience. And I think there's also this movement towards small data because AI people want it to be easier to train an AI to do something. So they're really obsessed with what's the minimum viable data to make an AI work. And I think that's already starting to trickle down a little bit into what an analyst can use and not, maybe not even be a data scientist. So I think we'll see more tools coming from there where you can take, maybe you don't have tons of data, maybe you don't even want to bother with storing it, but you'll be able to personalize and you'll be able to use kind of what's coming out of the AI industry. Mm-hmm.
My prediction is that 100% of what we buy is going to be by recommendation. So by recommendation of a friend, by recommendation by an expert at Stitch Fix. And so, data will play an important piece in making that happen. But I think, I was looking for gray high-waisted jeans, for example, and I'm 5'2". And so in order to solve that problem, I could either spend a whole day at the mall, I could have 30 browser tabs open, I could go to Orchard Mile and have all those in one place, but I could have all 30 browser tabs open where I personally am going through and looking at the inseam and the ankle opening and the rise and measurements of every jean and trying to guess how tall the model is and then shipping a bunch of them to my house and then trying to figure out which ones are best for me. And there's just no way that that's the future. Like the future, it should be as easy to find gray high-waisted jeans that are gonna fit you and look great on you as it is to get the oil changed on your car. And so the idea that each of us is gonna have to be an expert in every single product category that we want to buy, I don't think is the future. And so I really believe this recommendations is the future, and data will be an enabler in that.
One of the ideas that I'm really obsessed with is how to manage experience in the moment with data. So one of these examples is with Disney, and they have these fast pass wristbands, and you can book your time on Magic Mountain and what have you, but it anticipates, it knows if you're, the ride is running 20 minutes late. And instead of you being mad about it, it will gift you a free slushie for your kids if it's, and to appease your pain point at that time. And I think, that's a really great example, obviously, of the Internet of Things, but specifically, more and more data will be collected just by you being, rather than you explicitly checking the box. Here's what I want to tell you. The companies will know simply by you just moving through the world in your day-to-day life.
So fascinating. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. So we have a couple of things. So you guys voted before this panel, and this is the results of what big data is. So essential for modern commerce, a useful tech tool to be used judiciously, or essential for keeping nerds at their desks in dark rooms. I would argue that some of it should be used for that. But clearly the balance is essential for modern commerce. But that does lead me, so we have some questions that people sent in via Slido, and I forgot to mention that, at the fcdnyc.com, you can also ask questions of the panel. We have got some, but before we ask them, there was a lot of conversation there about what data is and what it can be used for, but I'm interested in what can it not do? Nicole, you've spent your life looking at fashion on the runways as well as everywhere else. I don't think much of that was inspired by data. So, you know, just give me an example of something that happens because of the purity of fashion design, not because of data.
I think you sort of said it. I think a unique designer point of view, and especially, you know, when it merges with at the right time in the right place, it sort of feels like magic. Gucci is a good example. It's sort of the fashion phenomenon of the last couple of years. So, I think what happens up in here is really special, and so far computers haven't figured out.
Can I add in though? I feel like Gucci also is tracking that data every time we like something on their Instagram and on their Snapchat. So as much as we want to think that it is a magic moment, which it is, I mean, come on, the collections are incredible. You know, those people, there are nerds in the back sitting there tracking all of our every moves, liking that collection. So, and rest assured, that is definitely being collected.
Yeah, also a lot of help. I think he has 70 designers working on it.
Yes, that too.
The other one that I would add, though, is actually this human connection of just like, as you think about if you have a relationship with somebody in a store at Gucci who's sending you text messages and asking you how your kids are, or if a stylist at Stitch Fix is hearing about your vacation and said, you know, I think that human-to-human connection is another thing that I don't see data replicating.
Okay. So, Heather, you want to choose a question?
Sure. So on the Slido, I'm going to choose the one from Ryan. In your experience, can quantitative data ever accurately capture the intangibles of luxury fashion? What do those data points look like?
So Jessica, you come from a more technical point of view. What do you think about that?
I would say images. I think we've really come to a point now where AI can read an image and know that it's a V-neck or it's a boat neck or it's got a certain type of button on it. And we're kind of reaching that point where AI can do that. So I think that's one example that comes off. Okay.
Excellent. Okay, well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Please, everyone, join me in saying thank you to the panel.